Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of COVID Convos, where we have real conversations with real people about well-being in the time of a pandemic. My name's Simon. I've got my fellow hosts here tonight as well. Kesh, how are you, buddy?
Doing all right, man. Doing all right.
Good to see you again. And the great Griggsy.
The great Griggsy, thank you. That's a nice change.
I feel so left out now.
This rolls off the tongue. I don't know why. I've got to come up with something for Kesh, but
Kesh the Conqueror. I don't know.
Cool Kesh, maybe. And we've got a special guest tonight, Louise Tidmand. Hi, Louise.
The legendary Louise.
Hello. Hi. So good to be with you. And thank you for inviting me.
It's a pleasure. Great to see you and great to hear your voice.
You too. It's been a while.
Yeah, it has been a while.
Yeah.
Louise, can you just take a couple of minutes maybe to introduce yourself to our listeners or viewers who probably aren't aware of you, and just explain a bit about your background.
Yes. Well, I'm Louise Tidmand. I recently became a doctor because I have studied and really do study well-being among children and adolescents. And my background is I'm from Denmark. I live in Denmark. I'm currently also in Denmark. And I worked as a teacher, teaching from the 1st grade till 10th grade for about 15 years. And then I became very, very interested in what factors actually make a difference in how children cope and how adolescents cope with obstacles, and just, from being turned down to be part of a game or a play to actually adversity on a greater level. And so that really became interesting for me around, about 10 years ago, in 2010. And then I started studying educational psychology, took my master's in educational psychology, and doing that, I started studying positive psychology. This was like in the early days of positive psychology, and where most of the studies done with interventions, strength-based or happiness-enhancing factors based on Sonja Lyubomirsky and Fredrickson and all the great people in the field, had mostly, all the studies had mostly been with adults. Oh, sorry, have to turn that off. I'm sorry.
Totally fine. I think that's the first time it's actually happened in any of our recordings.
Really?
Yeah.
I am so sorry.
No, it brings up the challenge of working remotely, doesn't it? These things happen.
It does. But anyway, so what I wanted to do is to take all this great knowledge that was emerging within the field of positive psychology and say, can we actually apply this to children? So, and nothing had been, like, no interventions had been written yet. And so I was then working as a teacher as well. And so with my classes and the parents, I started developing exercises based on the research done with adults. And I wrote my first book, which was actually elaborated and came about working with the children and the parents and getting feedback. And it's called My Happy Book. My Happy Book, 25 exercises for happier children and parents. And so, which has, it's really based on, it has 5 themes, focus on the positive, which would be like optimism and focusing on the positive, the whole resource-based approach or perspective. It works with strength, it works with altruism, making a difference in other people's lives, with gratitude. And so there are 25 exercises that actually builds up the knowledge of the children, but very, very practical and written as a very hands-on book. So when I had to do my thesis for the master's in educational psychology, I made it the intervention. And so we did this intervention on a 2-month period, where this book was actually just given to teachers and classes. And these were all third, fourth, and fifth graders. And it actually ended up being such a great number of participants that the whole study became representative for the age group 9 to 12 years old. And I worked with a mixed method approach to the study. So we measured optimism level using the CASC measure, which was developed by Richard Tannenbaum and Nadine Casco, students of Seligman. And I used another measurement on self-esteem, where you measure self-esteem, but self-perception on 7 different parameters. You measure, like, how do I think I look? What is my, do I think I'm smart? What is my relationship to friends, to family? So actually on 7 different parameters. And then I did qualitative interviews with the kids as well. And I did practice portrait inspired questionnaires for the teachers and also the parents. So it was quite a large study involving a lot of people, but it was also very significant, the results that we got, because when we measured the self-esteem, or like the self-perception, we really looked at there was a general rise in all the numbers, and got a higher and more positive self-perception. But when we looked at some students that profit more, and it was actually the students that in the before study or measurement had very low self-esteem. On the Stanning score, which is a score, a measure that you use, they were from 1 to 4, like having the negative self-perception. And actually they, in general, in average, they had a positive development equaling 194%, so which was really significant. And on optimism level, it was the same. The ones with the negative thinking patterns, or very negative, pessimistic thinking patterns, pessimistic or even very pessimistic, they averaged in general, or in average, 82%. So these were actually quite significant results, and so we did write an article about it, and that became the start of my line of work, really. So and all this that my Habit book is now also we developed like a teacher's guide, a student book, and a workbook. And after that, I've just written a bunch of materials on working with strength, all very, very hands-on. Having this, being a teacher originally, like really, I think is an advantage here, because it's, I do work with how to plan the lesson and options, and knowing what it's like to be out there with 28 students, fooling around in a classroom. So yeah, and fortunately all these materials have been endorsed by the National Board of Health in Denmark, and the National Board of Social Services, and the Psychiatrical Foundation. So it's amounted to strength games and strength books, and some of them are actually now both in French and in English. So yeah. And so finally it was like, why don't you do a PhD? And I'm like, yeah, maybe. So I did an intervention for a year in the PhD, working with, based on the whole framework of positive education, really trying to broaden well-being and say, what's something that's more than well-being, that's also resilience, but actually, like how to cope with life in general, which has a Danish word called life doability. Because and life doability has this double agency, where it's about you creating a life for you, or designing a life for you that is doable, that you are able to do. And on the other hand, life being actually doable. Do you get my point? So whereas when we talk about coping skills, life coping skills, life skills, it's like there's a life out there that I have no impact on, and I just need the skills to learn to live that life. Whereas when we talk about life doability, there's this double agency, I call it, where it's also about life being actually doable, and you choosing a life that is doable for you. You know, saying we don't necessarily need to live the same life, all of us. Whereas when we talk school and education, it's like we educate our children and adolescents to go out and live the same life. Do you get my point? Whereas I'm like, it has to do with your core values. It has to do with what are your strengths, what brings well-being to your life. And then, you know, we live in an age where you can pick and choose. I mean, life is so full of possibilities that once you know your strengths and what brings well-being to you and your core values and all that, I mean, then you design a life out there that is doable, that is attractive for you to do. So that's the whole point of so I'm really interested in your input on this well, you can say it's a concept, but it's become a construct as well, as I've really dug into it and is now putting together an online platform with a catalog, like a program teaching doability, life doability, based on the whole positive education framework. So let me hear about what you think about this construct or this concept of life doability.
I think Kesh is trying to say something, but we're not hearing anything he's saying. He's actually speechless after that.
I left you speechless? No.
I muted my mic. Sorry, I've got so many things to say, but I feel like there was so much there, and I just want to go back because I know not a lot, and not some of our listeners might not be academics. Right. So let's just clarify. Louise is a PhD doctor, not an MD doctor. Yeah. Right. And there seems to be, you know, a lot of amazing work that you've done, but a common thread that's been underlying all of that is what allows kids to thrive. And can we teach that to them? Yeah. And your master's thesis, if I can simplify it, even though it was a very big project, seems to have found that kids that are thriving can thrive more, and kids that aren't thriving, they're the ones that benefit the most from, you know, happiness exercises. Is that
yes?
Pretty simple. Yep.
Spot on.
Yeah, and that's taken you to this new concept of life doability, which I'm really interested in, and I think it has links to some of the work of Lindsay Odes and thrivability theory, also some of what Jess Taylor was talking about in responsibility and responsibility.
Yeah.
But before I tap into that, I actually think that it might be beneficial to explore this idea through a case study. Yeah. Mm-hmm. How does your construct of life doability, how is it helping, or how is it being applied to kids that are going through COVID right now, in the way that you're seeing it?
Yes, it's so when you look at the concept, I mean, I dug into you know, the whole history of it, where it was based on how school was to teach like life, or teach about life and how to live life. And so it comes down to three components, or three aspects, and what you would call personal character, social competencies, and cognitive competencies. And so and within those fields, I mean, and they all, you know, intertwine with one another, but it's really to focus on, you know, saying your personal strengths, or your personal character, or personal traits, has to do with who am I, what are my core values, And it's really where the application of the strength, the 24 wire strength, is essential in working with, like, who am I, but also what do I thrive from? If we spot on look at some of Sonja Lyubomirsky's work on happiness enhancing factors and different strategies to apply well-being into your life through actual hands-on exercises. That would be in that area. And then we have, of course, the social competencies, which is, like mentalization, empathy, taking other people's perspective, but also interaction, communication, lots of things are in that category. And then the cognitive competencies really have to do with also what you could say, referring to school, like all the subjects, all the knowledge, but also how does my brain work? Why do I need to sleep? Why is that important? And thinking patterns, and or what you would say coping. How do you cognitively cope? Well, what do you think, and how do you cope? What are the strategies that you use when coping with, like, COVID-19? So how could, we could apply different exercises from each of the three categories in say, like, construct a case where you have a kid or an adolescent, like, well, what's going to happen with my exam? I can't finish, or what do I do? Or does it going to hit me? All the anxiety that some kids are feeling right now, missing their friends and all that. So I think the importance here is, I've actually made a program for each of my kids to every day do a little exercise based on what is your strategy to more well-being. So, Sonja Lyubomirsky works with the 12 different strategies, whereas 4 of them would apply mostly to you. And so, depending on which are your strategies, do little exercises, 20 minutes, 30 minutes exercises every day to just fill up that account, to fill up your resilience account or your joy account. I see it like every time we do exercises that brings us joy, that generates positive emotions, it's like I have like at my bank account, my joy account here. It's like you think of it as a bank account. It's like you deposit. As you would put money into a bank account, you put well-being into your personal account. And that's what really balances that you prevent depression and the anxiety, because you have more to what's that in English? It's like you're bolstered. Do you get my point? Or I don't know if I explained myself. So that could be actual exercises. Where on the social competencies, I think it's very important that we're all experiencing being together in new ways. I think our kids and adolescents are more than we are used to seeing each other FaceTime and all that, but now it's like all we have, so it's really also working with developing your social competencies, being on digital platforms and how to dose that in, how to be social but with a distance. And the cognitive competencies, I think, really has to do with also how to learn on these new platforms, as much of the schooling now is being done like in Zoom meetings and on different platforms. So it's really also about how to learn differently that when in the classroom. It's also like, how does my brain work? Why is it important to keep a structure? Everybody's saying, it's so important that you get up every morning and you have a structured day. Whereas, the first week, that was really a theme here in Denmark, that all kids would just sleep in late, and, the whole cycle of the day would, you know, you stay up and watch movies all night, you don't have to get up the next day. And so why is it important for our body, our system, our brains to, you know, to get your sleep, to have a routine and things like that? So from the crisis, I think if we really put, you know, our attention to it, we could learn so much from it, you know, as to how does my brain work? Why is it important to have a structure? Not just tell the kids, you know, you need to get up every morning, because if you don't explain why, it seems ridiculous. You know, why can't I just sleep in late? I was watching a movie till 3 o'clock, you know. So really take the opportunity from the COVID-19 and learn from that. Yeah.
So again, if I can butcher and simplify a vast amount of knowledge that you've just put out there, you know, there is this idea that happiness kind of happens to you, right? And
yeah,
it's prevalent across our societies and the way that we think. But what you're kind of getting at here with the 3 components and life doability is happiness has core components or skills. And it's kind of like a video game. Like if you know, do the levels, you can level them up, you know, you can build up your bars. You know, if you do the exercises and you do your practice. And it does have a little bit of a resonance or a similarity to some of the work that Lindsay's been doing in capability theory. So competency, capability, some people say responsibility, but basically, do you have the skills to be able to take care of your well-being, right? And that's what you're kind of outlining here and what you've sort of been playing with your 25 exercises and this doability model, right? But it comes down to 2 things. First off, do you have the ability to do that? And second, do you have the freedom to do that? So like you're saying, with doability theory, there's that double agency where first off, I need to have the skills, but second off, life has to allow me. Because if I have the skills, but for whatever reason, there might be oppression or, you know, I don't have the resources available, then I can't live that life. And I have to be able to work with the life that I have, right? That's kind of like what COVID-19 is bringing out right now. What I've seen throughout these conversations is we've been talking to a lot of people that are similar like us, and they seem to have a lot of the well-being skills, and they're able to bring that out and have the freedom to sort of do that, although the freedom is limited at the moment because of COVID-19, whereas some people don't have the skills and the freedom is limited, and then they seem to be doing so much worse, right? So I guess, you know, what's coming out of that is you do have simple exercises that can help people build these well-being capabilities, and they've been proven to work, right? So I also know that, you know, we're kind of running out of time. It's amazing to me how short all of this stuff is. Is there anything, you know, that we haven't touched on that you think is really important that you want to tell people before we have to wrap up?
I just want to give one really nice exercise that I think everyone can do. And that's, you know, when you look in the mirror every day in the morning, you know, get that very nice eye contact with yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, what can I do today to make you happy?
I love that. I love that, Louise. It brings back a memory of one of my favorite movies, Cool Runnings. Very different activity that they do in that one, but I really like the idea of looking yourself in the mirror and having some sort of self-conversation. Is that something that you include in your own daily routine?
Yes, I do. I look at, you know, I would phrase, you know, and the day and myself, and, you know, have this conversation with myself about what can I do. And also, I mean, it might, to some people think, you know, seem a little crazy that you stand there and you talk to yourself, but even though when you have negative thoughts about yourself, how, you know, we judge ourselves very much, and I didn't do this, I didn't do that, I can't, you know, and all this negative self-talk. You know, look in the mirror and be your own best friend. Would you ever talk to your best friend like you talk to yourself in your head? So, and you know, talking to that image of yourself in the mirror just really makes it very hands-on, that you're like, what am I saying to myself? What am I actually saying in out loud words to who's supposed to be my best friend? You're supposed to be my best friend. You like, you know, you tell yourself in the mirror, you're supposed to be my best friend, and you tell me this, you know. So actually, even though it might seem weird to some people, I think self-conversation is very good and very accessible for everyone.
Yeah, great advice, Louise. I love your take on that, talking to yourself in the mirror. I'll give it a go myself, but I think at the minimum, it's good just to recognise that voice in your head, isn't it? Whether you actually go and speak out loud to tell it to be quiet or not, the first step, I think, is recognising it. So
yeah,
that's something maybe other people can try as well. We really are over time now, Louise, unfortunately. It's been great to hear from you. Lots of information there for us and all our guests. We're really appreciative of your time and that you're able to come and share that with us. We've got 101 or 1,001 extra questions, but yeah, we really do need to say goodbye now. So thanks again for your time.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for having me on. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Kesh and Griggsy. And we'll see you next time. But until then, you stay healthy, world.